I just got a text from someone who's going through some stuff at the moment, and he said that he got frustrated and punched the wall, and I called him a toddler. Now he's not talking to me. But do you ever have that thing where someone sends you a message and they say, "I've just been a dick," and you go, "Dick?" And then they're like, "Why did you call me a dick?" And you're like, "Because you're a dick." What did you expect me to say? "Oh, is your hand okay?" Don't be a dick. Ugh. I'm going to preface this show by saying that there will most definitely be some background noises today because I have the windows open because it is super warm but also cloudy. So it's one of those days where it's just really muggy outside and I had to have the windows open, but it's the middle of the day and so there is traffic, I don't even know what that is, there's noise. Alright, so I'm going to do my best to tidy up the audio when I send out this YouTube video and the podcast version because I appreciate listening to a podcast myself where the audio quality is rather decent. I cannot promise that to you today, and I apologise in advance. Hello people, and welcome to the People Building Podcast. Today I am going to be sharing with you tips, stories, ideas, references, anything I can possibly think of that will help you feel a little more prepared when it comes to doing the right thing. So if you're in a situation now, or you are perhaps even reflecting on situations you've experienced in the past where you wonder if you did the right thing, or you're thinking about stuff that might show up in the future and you're wondering what the right thing is going to be to do, then just keep on watching. Or if you're out there in podcasting land, then you can just keep on listening. Hi everybody. So for this particular subject, I feel like this is so messy. I feel like this is such a messy thing. This is such a messy subject to try and untangle. I don't think that what I'm going to share with you today is going to have a clear start, middle, and here's where we land, and here's the conclusion to this subject area, because I feel like I'm going to jump around a little bit today, so apologies in advance, but I really did quite a brief amount of reading around how do you know what the right thing is to do, like what is doing the right thing, and on the most part, despite finding a WikiHow page, the only real conclusion that was made is that unless life or the circumstances that you are in are providing you with a very prescriptive set of rules around what right is, you can never be sure that what you're doing is ultimately the right thing. The one thing that I did get out of reading into this a little bit more is that doing the right thing largely relates to what is right for the greater good, for the majority of others, and not necessarily for yourself. And I feel like I might contradict myself on that one a little bit later. But on that note, I think a good starting place for us to explore, which I've mentioned many times on the People Building Podcast, is the subject of ecology. So ecology is the study of consequences on the wider system. So if you imagine that there is a circle, a bubble if you like, inside of that is you. And then surrounding that one is a wider circle, a wider bubble, and that contains others. And then around that one, so there's another even bigger circle, another bubble, which contains the other two. That one is the greater good. So when we talk about ecology, we're looking at those three different circles, those three different bubbles, if you like, to see if what we are thinking of doing works for all three of them, because ideally, if an idea is ecological, then it would do. And so if we are thinking about doing the right thing, the question we would be asking is this good for me? Is it good for others? And does it serve the greater good? And if the answer to any of those questions is no, then it's likely there may be trouble ahead.
There may be trouble ahead.
And so it may be that the thing that we think is the right thing to do maybe isn't going to be right for everybody. Sometimes doing the right thing might be right for everybody else, but not yourself. And remember when I said I was going to contradict myself earlier? Well, here it comes. Sometimes, but not always, sometimes you have to do what's right by you. And it's not necessarily going to be good for everybody else as well. So here's a time when I think that doing the right thing by yourself and not by everyone else might ultimately be okay. And this is where it starts to get a bit more complex, or at least my thinking feels like it gets more complex. It comes down to what happens if you don't take care of you. So, you know, like the saying around if you're on an aircraft and the oxygen mask comes down, you should put your own on before you put on other people's. I guess it kind of ties in with that, because if you're not going to be in a good place, then do you continue to bring value to others in the long term anyway? And if the answer is no, then actually doing the right thing for yourself first and putting yourself ahead of others might actually be the right thing to do, because it may mean that in the future you serve or save others more because you first took care of yourself. What that means is that sometimes doing the right thing might feel wrong. Doing the right thing might at times feel wrong, because it may feel as if you are being mean. It might feel as if you are exercising tough love, for example, and it might feel as if you are being even unkind. But what I think is really important here is thinking about those longer term ramifications of the decisions that you take when you are doing or thinking of what the right thing is going to be for you to do. It's not just about what will this do right now and tomorrow and next week, but beyond that. And sometimes in doing the right thing, it's also about taking a risk, because we don't know what the future is going to look like. You know, we can't plan for that. We can't think about the implications. Did anybody ever used to watch, and I freaking loved this show, but I think I've seen every single episode now because I watched them all on YouTube as well. But do you remember a show called Seconds from Disaster? They had like the best introduction, and I don't remember all of the wording exactly, but it's along the lines of the disaster happens because of a series of catastrophic events. So it's not just one thing, it's the ripple effect of one thing onto something else, and then the ripple effect of that onto something else, into something else. And so we can't always think about what all of those various different ripple effects might be, and all of the different variations that there are in those future stringy timelines that might be there out in front of us. We don't always know what direction life is going to take, let alone people in their individualism. So thinking about the long-term ramifications is not easy. Let me give you an example here, and this is one that really had to think very carefully about even sharing this with you. This is not a story that I've told before, but it's one that still brings me a level of discomfort. And in all honesty, maybe after I've said it, I may not feel that discomfort anymore, which is why I'd value the time to share it with you, perhaps. A while back, like a good few years ago, in one of my other companies, we became very successful at writing applications for funding, both for ourselves as a company, but also for other organisations who wanted to apply for funding in order that they could work with us. Now, the downside of doing that, whilst I felt very encouraged to do so, and I'll come to that in just a minute, the downside of that is that it was breaking the rules. It was just straight up breaking the rules. Each organisation should be writing their own application. They shouldn't have been using an outside bid writer, i.e. me, in order to do it. Now, is that something that commonly happens? Yeah, it is. However, there were other things that happened, such as the project that was delivered not entirely matching up with the bid that was written, because the company or the organisation that was applying for the funding needed more flexibility than the parameters of that bid. Now, on one hand, I can look back on that time and say our organisation and the other organisations that I was writing applications for helped so many children and families in like really beautiful and amazing ways that I and my team will always be really proud of. And that's the part of me that thinks that we did the right thing. You know, we really served the greater good, even though I was taking a reputational risk by breaking the rules in the first place. And I could have gotten into some trouble for doing that. And I did a little tiny bit. The flip side of that is it could be argued very reasonably, it could be argued that we were using funds that were available in a way that didn't match the criteria that they had set out completely. Didn't completely match the criteria that was set out. Wasn't wildly different, but, you know, it was things like the funding can't be used during the school day to help children in school. And the school would say, we can't get these children to show up after school. They're not going to stick around after school. We need you to deliver this in the school day. And so then we would make an executive decision as a company to say, is it better that they have help or no help? It's better that they have help. Therefore, we will break the rules and we'll deliver the sessions that are required within the school day. But now that's broken the terms of the funding. Do you see what I'm saying? So there were things, well, there was that happened, and there were other things on that sort of similar kind of a level of rule breaking that existed then. And so it, quite rightly, was flagged up as something that we should not have been doing. Let me give you a couple of other parallels that showed up in this situation. Here's what was good. The people that were working with our organisation at the time, who benefited from being paid to deliver work and therefore, you know, access the funding, were very, very happy because we were providing them with work, and they each had their own individual business, but they didn't really have to go out and find the business for themselves. They didn't have to be business people. They just got the work. It kind of landed in their laps for them. That was fabulous. They loved it. The flip side of that, which makes me think maybe it wasn't the right thing to do, became that they got kind of used to that. They got kind of lazy around going out there and being business people and learning how to run a business and learning how to market themselves and attract clients. So then I look at it and go, oh man, like nothing about that particular series of projects was the right thing to do. And it came to quite an ugly ending in that the funders discovered that I was the person that was writing all these very good, successful bids. And they wrote to me and they told me that they were going to get their lawyers onto me unless I stopped. So I stopped. We were making such a positive difference in the world. How could we not be doing the right thing? You know, of course we were doing the right thing. But the rules is the rules. And if you break them, there are ramifications from that. And then you can see we're not doing the right thing. So you remember up front I said doing the right thing is really difficult to define, unless there are very specific guidelines in place, like very specific criteria that already sets out this is the right thing to do. When I look at it from that perspective and I go, well, yeah, there actually was a criteria that said we weren't supposed to be doing that, then I can hand on heart say we were not doing the right thing. There's a little bit of me, if I'm being completely honest, that wants to say we did the wrong thing, but for the right reasons. I don't know as if that would wash, in a court of law, for example. So we're in this situation where what life is showing us in helping us to decide the difference between the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do is not as clear as black and white. It's very often in that weird grey area in the middle, like it always is, which makes it very difficult to define. However, if there are rules and guidelines and things that are general laws and specific directions that tell you in advance this is the right thing to do, then do that. The more challenging side of this is when you are dealing with things like people and their personal issues, their mindset and their emotions. There isn't a hard and fast way of defining what the right thing to do is, particularly when it comes to helping others. And the best that I can suggest here is that know who you're working with so that you can take their individuality into consideration in carving out a plan that helps you decide what is the right thing to do for them, given who they are, given their character, given their circumstances. Because even as a therapist who has been trained to use specific tools in a very specific way, unless I work with flexibility in the clients that I am interacting with, some of them are going to end up falling through the net and I won't have done the right thing for them by using that particular strategy or technique with them, because it just didn't match up with who they are. So you need to be able, when you're working with people and you're considering what is the right thing to do here, to think about the whole person as much as possible. Now, I have a situation in my life at the moment which is quite challenging because I am helping out a family member who I think it would be fair to say I've been estranged from for the best part of a decade, a really long period of time. And I am wanting to help him and to do the right thing, but all of what I've just said about taking his character and personality into consideration is quite difficult to do, because when you haven't been around someone for a really long period of time, you maybe don't know their character and their personality all that well, and it makes making decisions with them or on their behalf a much more difficult thing to do. My sister is a really good example of that as well. My sister has very severe special needs and doesn't have any form of communication, not verbal, but no other form as well. And so doing the right thing by her largely relies on me thinking, what do I think my sister's needs and wants and preferences might be? Do that. But ultimately, not really knowing and just kind of winging it a bit. I think very often when we're in a situation where we're weighing up what is the right thing to do, unless you have those clear guidelines in place that already tell you, and if you do, then you're not really, needing to listen to this podcast, because you don't need help to get the answer. The answer is there for you. But very often I think that we're kind of winging it a little bit in order to make a decision about what to do and why we chose that, and to be able to justify it. When you are thinking about what is the right thing to do by someone else, so a good example of this that I come up against a lot is within my company NLP for Kids, where we quite often work with safeguarding issues. And in a safeguarding situation, we have to take the best interests of the child into account primarily. That's the most important thing. It's challenging at times to not get tangled up in the story of what's happening with the parents, or the story of their history, or the story of where they are now or where they might be going to. It makes it really difficult at times to know what doing the right thing is. Most often doing the right thing does involve the safeguarding team, if you suspect that there is a safeguarding issue there, because if there's not, they'll filter it out anyway. Let that be their job and not yours, just as a little heads up. Typically within psychology, it may come across a little negatively, one of the things that is used as a benchmark for considering how someone might behave in the future is to look at their past behaviours. So the best indicator of how someone might behave and react in the future is to think about how they behaved and reacted in the past. Now, the NLP part of my brain says, people can change, and, change is possible, and that you don't have to judge people's people's present and future based on their history, and all of those sorts of things, which I also subscribe to. I also believe to be true. If I am being more generalisy, that's not a word, but we're going to roll with it anyway. If I am generalising more so, and I'm thinking about people as a whole rather than an individual that I've personally known has changed, then I would roll with the idea that the best indicator for future outcomes are based on previous ones. The best indicator for future behaviours are based on previous ones, and that is a methodology that's typically used, for example, in criminal psychology. The best indicators for how someone might behave once they leave prison is going to be based on what they did before they went to prison, or how they were behaving whilst they were in prison. That's going to give us an idea about what's going to happen when they get back out there in society. That helps to put the safeguards in place to hopefully help them to avoid doing the thing that got them into prison in the first place. So this idea kind of rolls out into lots of different aspects of life. So when it comes to doing the right thing and knowing what's right for particularly somebody else, I think in trying to predict the future and think about the effect that that's going to have on them and the people around them, the thing that needs considering is how have they behaved or reacted in other similar situations in the past. If 100 years from now there is another global pandemic, good luck, firstly. And secondly, in order to know the best way to carve out public policy around managing that pandemic, you're going to be looking back at the pandemic we've just had with COVID to see how might people react, and how do we need to kind of police the situation, how do we need to proposition a vaccine rollout, and all of those things that have been really difficult for us to manage over the last year and a half will help people in the future to make hopefully a slightly better plan around how to manage it all. In addition, we might find that 100 years from now, society has changed so significantly that actually what's happening now isn't the best indicator around what to do at that time. There might be other more recent events that would give a better indication as to how the population will react to being quarantined and locked down and all of those different sorts of experiences that we've had to go through. So this doesn't just apply on an individual basis. Like if I want to know how someone's going to behave to me putting restrictions or solutions in place for them that I believe I'm doing because I'm doing the right thing, in order to know how they're going to react to that, I need to look at their past behaviour. It doesn't just apply to an individual, it applies to entire populations. If you want to know how a group or a community is going to respond to certain sanctions that are put in place, or even rewards that are put in place, look back on their reactions and responses to previous sanctions and rewards that were put in place in the past, and then you can decide, am I really doing the right thing for them, or might this actually have quite a detrimental effect on them? Sometimes doing the right thing isn't just about ecology, it's also about economics, and what offers a wider or greater number of positive outcomes. So there's some really interesting kind of social psychology, philosophical, I don't know why that was so difficult to say, philosophical questions that surround this that really get you thinking about, wow, like what really is the right thing to do in that particular situation. And I'm going to share a couple of them with you now. For those of you watching on YouTube, there may have been a change in lighting because I had to pull the blinds down because the sun just reached that spot where it was about to start blinding me, and my camera cut off. So I had to jump up and deal with that. So this is called the trolley problem. I'm going to be sharing this from the Wikipedia page, so I will include a link to that in the description for the show today. The trolley problem simply relates to a series of thought experiments and ethical / psychological type problem solving exercises and different dilemmas for you to think through. And there are a few different variations on it, and I'll share one or two of those with you as well. In English, for all of my British friends, trolley just means like a train carriage. Oh, actually, in the picture of it here, it looks more like a tram. You know, like the trams at Blackpool, it looks like one of those. Okay, so here is the trolley problem. The series usually begins with a scenario in which a runaway tram or trolley is on course to collide with and kill a number of people, traditionally 5, down a track. But a driver or bystander can intervene and divert the vehicle to kill just one person on a different track. Other variations, including life and death dilemmas, medical and legal scenarios are posed, each containing the choice to either do nothing and let several people die, or intervene and sacrifice one initially safe person to save them. So on one hand, I think doing the right thing in this scenario is to kill the one and save the 5. But in reading more about this, that then becomes a conscious decision to kill one person versus just letting what's going to happen and not being a murderer. You know, you're kind of letting nature take its course. So what's the right thing to do here? Let nature take its course and 5 people die, or to deliberately cause someone's murder but only one person dies? What is the right thing to do? What do you think? Answers on a postcard, people, or just email them to me. It's gemma@peoplebuilding.co.uk. All right, so in a empirical study, this was posed to people, and they were put through MRI scanners. There was also a group that were placed in a real life kind of experiment. So they thought it was real. It was actually pre-recorded. So maybe they used some kind of simulator or something. Anyway, the participants, oh, I see. They thought that they were in a train switching station. So they were watching footage that they thought was real at the time. So the participants had the option to pull the lever and divert the train towards a second track, killing the 1 person, or leaving it where it was headed and killing the 5. In this study that was done, most people did not pull the lever. Most people let the 5 die. All right. Now, maybe that's because of what it would mean, because of that meaning of I would deliberately be murdering people if I'd pulled the lever, or I'd be deliberately murdering a person if I deliberately pulled that lever. Oh, I don't know. So there has been some criticism of the trolley problem. You can read about that on the Wikipedia page should you like to, but I wanted to share this problem with you before I leave you today as well. So it's a variation on the trolley problem. So in this scenario, there is a bridge. You are standing on the bridge and the train is going to be coming underneath the bridge. And if that train doesn't stop, it's going to hit 5 people that are on the track up ahead. The only way to stop the train is to block it by putting something heavy on the tracks in front of it, and that will cause it to stop. The only heavy thing that is available to you is the man who is standing next to you on the bridge, who is a fat man. So I think the purpose of him being a fat man is that he's a large, heavy thing, so therefore he will most definitely stop the train. So the question is, should you kill the fat man to save the 5 people who are on the track up ahead? All right, so with this one, I actually find it more difficult because I think physically placing my hands on a person to cause their death is more close to murder than pulling a lever. But that's just me. So I think in that scenario, I might let the 5 people die. I don't know, what would you do? Final thing on this is there was a real life trolley problem, a real life incident that occurred in June 2003 when a string of 31 unmanned Union Pacific freight cars were barreling towards LA along mainline track 1. To avoid the runaway train from entering the Union Pacific yard in LA, where it would not only cause damage, but there was also a Metrolink passenger train that was thought to be located, the dispatchers ordered the shunting of the railway cars to track 4 through an area with low density housing of mostly lower income residents. The switch to track 4 was rated for 15-mile-per-hour transits, and the dispatchers knew that the cars were moving significantly faster. Thus, likely it would cause a derailment, which it did. So the train was carrying over 3,800 tons of mostly lumber and building materials, derailed into the residential neighborhood in Commerce, California, crashing through several houses on Davie Street. The event resulted in 13 minor injuries, including a pregnant woman who was asleep in one of the houses but managed to escape through a window and avoided serious injury from the lumber and steel train wheels that fell around her. So, gosh, that one, I think there could have been a really different outcome to that story, because if the people that were injured had been killed, I think there would be some really serious ethical questions asked around the decision to send that train toward a low-income neighborhood versus leaving it where it was and having it potentially hit a passenger train, which maybe would be filled with a slightly different class of people. I don't know, I'm just putting it out there, I'm just saying. So I don't know. I think maybe sometimes these doing the right thing scenarios can appear to be a bit of a catch-22 situation. And you've probably heard me mention Catch-22 before. It is a book by Joseph Heller. And the reason why I like that book, and if you haven't read it and you have no intention of reading it, you can actually see on Channel 4 Catch Up. I think it may still be there. There was a televised series by the same name, Catch-22. It's about pilots that are in the First World War, and they're in a situation where no matter which options they choose, the outcome always leads to the same thing. And I talk about Catch-22 when we're on NLP training, because a Catch-22 in our language is also known as a double bind, where no matter which choice you pick, the outcome always leads to the same thing. And we use it in a positive way, in a way that can be helpful to you. So I think sometimes doing the right thing can be a catch-22, where no matter what option you choose, it may lead to the same eventuality anyway, because particularly if you are making choices and decisions that affect other people, they're always going to do what they're going to do. And that's not me saying that they can't change. That's me saying that you have limited control on the outcomes that exist for other people, and that at times, in doing the right thing, the only thing we can really do is to prepare for the worst while simultaneously hoping for the best possible outcome. So if you've been in a situation where you have done the right thing and it worked out, then let me know in the comments box down below. If you have in the past thought you were doing the right thing and it turned out to be a disaster, then equally you can let me know in the comments box down below. You can also email me. It's gemma@peoplebuilding.co.uk. If you are listening via a podcasting platform, make sure that you subscribe to the show and give us a 5-star review wherever you're listening. It really does help me out loads. If you are watching on YouTube, then go ahead and click the thumbs up button to let me know that you liked this video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already, and make sure you click the notifications bell so that you get notified the next time I upload one of these videos / podcasts. So thank you all for either watching and listening or just listening, but either way, thank you for being here. I hope this has got the little grey cells buzzing around, considering different scenarios that we've talked about there. If anyone finds a hard and fast solution to doing the right thing, I'd be really open to hearing about it. But for now, thank you all so much for being here, and I will speak to you all again in 1 month's time. Take care, everyone. Bye.